Ozan stepped out of the cold, marble atmosphere of the bank, greeted by Tariq's warm smile and the bright Skopje sun. "Forget the paperwork for a moment," Tariq said, clapping Ozan on the shoulder. "Let me take you to the old bazaar for some real Turkish tea. There, language isn't a barrier. Everyone speaks Tarzan enough to understand each other." Ozan felt his stress from the earlier form crisis melting away, ready for a new adventure. As they entered the narrow, cobblestone streets of the old bazaar, the air was thick with the scent of grilled meatballs and freshly brewed tea. Tariq led Ozan to a cozy tea house with small wooden tables spilling onto the street. "This is my morning ritual," Tariq noted. Sitting down, Ozan felt the tension of the complex Cyrillic forms he'd struggled with at the bank finally dissipate into the vibrant atmosphere. A cheerful waitress named Mila approached with a tray. She immediately pegged Ozan as a traveler, but didn't miss a beat as she placed thin-waisted tea glasses on the table. "Hello, tea or coffee?" Mila asked in Turkish, her accent unique but her confidence unshakable. Surprised and delighted to hear a familiar tongue, Ozan replied, "Tea, please. Actually, make it two." While sipping his tea, Ozan suddenly remembered those famous meatballs he had heard so much about. "Tariq, I'm starving, but I only have Turkish lira. I couldn't exchange it at the bank, remember?" he said, looking slightly embarrassed. Tariq laughed and pointed toward a man standing in front of a shop across the way. "Don't sweat it. Look, there's Zoran. He can handle any currency, as long as you're ready for a little haggling." At the front of his shop, filled with antiques and old coins, stood Zoran. Wearing a colorful vest and a felt hat, he looked like a truly eccentric character. Tariq called out loudly, "Zoran, come over here. I've brought a guest with some exotic money in his pocket." Intrigued by the call, Zoran began to make his way across the cobblestones toward their table with a curious glint in his eye. When Zoran reached the table, Ozan pulled a few banknotes from his pocket and held them out. Zoran took them and began to inspect the paper as if it were a priceless diamond. "Ooh, Ataturk," Zoran exclaimed, immediately recognizing the portrait on the bill. "Good money, but we need to turn these into Macedonian dinars if you want to buy those meatballs, young man." Ozan was taken aback by Zoran's sudden, friendly expertise. Flipping the notes over, Zoran looked at Ozan and asked, "Are you a student? How old are you?" When Ozan mentioned he was 18 and traveling solo, Zoran's eyebrows shot up in respect. "Then we'll use the special student rate for you. This will get you your meatballs and even an ice cream for dessert." Ozan marveled at Zoran's street-smart hospitality, which felt much warmer than the bank's cold bureaucracy. Mila returned to the table a moment later to check on the bill. Zoran turned to her and held up a hand. "Mila, this boy is our guest. I've exchanged his money, so I'm taking care of this," he said, dropping a few coins onto Mila's tray. Mila rolled her eyes and laughed. "You always do this, Zoran," charming the tourists again, she teased before moving on to the next table. Ozan finally held the local currency in his hand. He looked at Tariq and burst out laughing. "If I showed these to Goran, that official back at the bank, he'd probably have a heart attack." Tariq joined in the laughter, his shoulders shaking. "That's how things work here, son. Rules stay in the bank, but life happens in the street. Now let's go, before those meatballs get cold." Looking at the steaming plate of meatballs in front of him at a local eatery, Ozan reflected on his day. He hadn't found a Turkish-speaking official at the bank, but on the street, he'd found a mentor, a friend, and enough human kindness to fill his belly. The best lesson of being 18, he thought to himself. Even if you don't speak the language, a smile is the key that opens every door.